The village in the jungle continued. All jungles are evil, but no jungle is more evil than that which lay about the village of Bedagama. If you climb one of the bare rocks that jut up out of it, you will see the jungle stretched out below you for mile upon mile on all sides. It looks like a great sea over which the pitiless hot wind perpetually sends waves unbroken, except where the bare rocks rising above it show like dark smudges against the grey-green of the leaves. For 10 months of the year, the sun beats down and scorches it, and the hot wind in a whirl of dust tears over it, tossing the branches and scattering the leaves. The trees are stunted and twisted by the drought, by the thin and sandy soil, by the dry wind. They are scabrous, thorny trees, with grey leaves whitened by the clouds of dust which the wind perpetually sweeps over them. Their trunks are grey with hanging, stringing lichen, and their enormous calyces evil-looking and obscene, with their great fleshy green slabs, which put out immense needle-like spines. More evil-looking still are the great leafless trees, which look like a tangle of gigantic spiders' legs, smooth, bright green, pointed together, from which, when they are broken, oozes out a milky, vicious fluid. And between the trees are the bushes, which often knit the whole jungle together into an impenetrable tangle of thorns. On the ground beneath the trees it is very stiff and very hot, for the sterile earth is covered with this thorny, matted undergrowth, through which the wind cannot force its way. The round of the great wind resulting and rushing over the treetops makes the silence below seem more heavy, and with the smell of dead leaves. All the bushes and trees seem to be perpetually dying for 10 months of the year, the leaves withering, and the twigs and branches decaying and dropping off, to be powdered over the ground among the coarse withered grass and the dead and blackened shrubs. And yet, every year, when the rain comes, the whole jungle bursts out again into green, and it forces its way forward into any open space, upon the tracks, into villages and compounds, striving to blot out everything in its path. If you walk all day through the jungle along its tangled tracks, you will probably see no living thing. It is so silent and still that you might well believe that nothing lives in it. You might perhaps, in the early morning, hear the trumpeting and squealing of a herd of elephants, or the frightened bark of the spotted deer, or the deeper bark of the sunboar, or the blaring call of the peacock. But as the day wore on and the heat settled down upon the trees, you would hear no sound but the rush of the wind overhead and the grating of dry branches against one another. Yet the shadows are full of living things, moving very silently, themselves like shadows, between the trees, slinking under the bushes and peering through the leaves. For the rule of the jungle is first fear, and then hunger and thirst. There is fear everywhere, in the silence and in the shrill calls and the wild cries, in the stir of the leaves and the grating of branches, in the gloom, in the startled, slinking, peering beasts. And behind the fear is always the hunger and the thirst. And behind the hunger and the thirst, fear again. The herd of deer must come down to drink at the waterhole. They come down, driven by their thirst, very silently, through the deep shadows of the trees to the water lying white under the moon. They glide like shadows out of the shadows into the moonlight, hesitating, tiptoeing, throwing up their heads to stare again into the darkness, leaping back, only to be goaded on again by their thirst, ears twitching to catch a sound and nostrils quivering to catch a scent of danger. And when the black muzzles go down into the water, it is only for a moment. And then with a rush, the herd scatters back, terror-stricken, into the darkness. And behind the herd comes the leopard, slinking through the undergrowth. Whom has he to fear? Yet there is fear in his eyes, and in his slinking feet, fear in his pricked ears, and in the bound with which he vanishes into the shadows at the least suspicious sound. In the time of the rains, the jungle might seem to be a pleasant place. The trees are green, and the grass stands high in open spaces. Water lies in pools everywhere. There is no need to go stealthily by night to drink at rivers or waterholes. The deer and the pig roam away, growing fat on the grass and the young leaves and the roots. The elephant travels far from the riverbank. The time of plenty lasts, however, but a little while. The wind from the northeast drops, the rain fails. For a month, a great stillness lies over the jungle. The sun looks down from a cloudless sky. The burning air is untempered by a breath of wind. It is spring in the jungle, a short and fiery spring, when in a day the trees burst out into great masses of yellow or white flowers, which in a day wither and die away. The pools and small waterholes begin to dry up under the great heat. The earth becomes caked and hard. Then the wind begins to blow from the southwest, fitfully at first, but growing stronger and steadier every day. A little rain falls, the last before the long drought sets in. The hot, dry wind sweeps over the trees. The grass and the shrubs lie down. The leaves on the small trees shrivel up and grow black and fall. The grey earth crumbles into dust and splits beneath the sun. The little streams run dry, the great rivers shrink, until only a thin stream of water trickles slowly along in the middle of their immense beds of yellow sand. The waterholes are dry. Only here and there, in the very deepest of them, in the rocks, a little muddy water remains. Then the real nature of the jungle shows itself. Over great tracts there is no water for the animals to drink. Only the elephants remember the great rivers which lie far away and whose banks they left when the rains came. As soon as the southeast wind begins to blow, they make for the rivers again. But the deer and the pig have forgotten the rivers. In the water holes, the water has sunk too low for them to reach it on the slippery rocks. For days and nights they wander round and round the holes, stretching down their heads to the water which they cannot touch. Many die of thirst and weakness round the water holes. From time to time, one, in his efforts to reach the water, slips and falls into the muddy pool, and in the evening the leopard finds him an easy prey. The great herds of deer roam away, tortured by thirst, through the parched jungle. They smell the scent of water in the great wind that blows in from the sea. Day after day, they wander away from the rivers into the wind, south towards the sea, stopping from time to time to raise their heads and snuff in the scent of water which draws them on. Again, many die of thirst and weakness on the way, and the jackals follow the herds and pull down in the open the fawns that their mothers are too weak to protect. And the herds wander on until at last they stand upon the barren, waterless shore of the sea. Such is the jungle which lay about the village of Bedagama. The village consisted of 10 scattered houses, mean huts made of mud plastered upon rough jungle sticks. Only one of the huts had a roof of tiles. That of the village headman, Babahami. The others were covered with a thatch of kajans, the dried leaves of coconut palm. Below the huts to the east of the village lay the tank, a large shallow depression in the jungle. Where the depression was deepest, the villagers had raised a long, narrow bund, or mound of earth, so that when the rain fell, the tank served as a large pond in which to store the water. Below the bund lay the stretch of rice fields, about 30 acres, which the village cultivated if the tank filled with water by cutting a hole in the bund, through which the water from the tank ran into the fields. The jungle rose high and dense around the fields and the tank. It stretched away unbroken, covering all the country except the fields, the tank, and the little space of ground upon which the houses and compounds stood.